Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today we're going to talk about a hilarious exchange that actually happened between Ethan Klein of H3H3 Productions and Cenk's nephew. And one of the things that's so hilarious about this is that Cenk's nephew was essentially being insulted by his co-host on the Leftovers podcast for the crappy stealing of people's content that is so prominent amongst Twitch streamers. And Cenk's nephew had to argue a bunch of idiotic positions, but it's just fun to absorb the awkwardness of this conversation, to absorb the fact that everything being said about, I think it's XQC, I don't know Twitchers, nor do I care about them, applies in spades to Cenk's nephew's own streams and all of his Twitch friends who are openly violating fair use doctrine, who are clearly and obviously stealing other people's content, profiting off of it, and of course, like the scumbags that they actually are, they don't even give proper accreditation. That's how these people roll. But before we get into this, I just want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to my podcast listeners on Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
Well, to be totally honest with you, dude, I don't like XQC. I think he sucks. I don't care anymore.
I mean, he's definitely an interesting figure.
He's an infringer. He's a sellout.
But I usually try to.
Which boundaries did you break?
One of the things is, I think you'll agree with this as well, is just like, don't leave the video running when you get up
100%
to go pee.
Yeah, you can't
That's
do
like
that.
Pretty basic stuff.
You stop doing that?
I only do it with I usually only do it with my videos that I know are from my friends, like Noah Samson, Second Thought, things like that. And
you do not have my permission to walk away from my videos.
For the record, I'm not actually walking away for any extended period of time. Like, what are you supposed to do if there's an emergency and you have
just
to
say, wait, I'll be right back.
So the setup for this right here already has Cenk's nephew completely uncomfortable. You could see that they're getting into the topic of this low effort content, aka them taking other people's stuff and making money off of it, not transforming it in any possible way. And Cenk's nephew is already on the defensive mode because he's guilty of the same thing. This reminds me of an old clip way back when where Ethan Klein was going after Jake or Logan Paul. Don't care which one, I'm being perfectly honest for you, for the high price of their merchandise, and Ethan's wife, who sells from that Teddy Fresh line at exorbitant prices, just look at this stuff, even though it's not worth it, by the way, was saying, hey, don't talk about the high prices over there, because we essentially have equivalent prices on our crappy website. I don't know if you guys remember that previous exchange, but this essentially is the equivalent of that, except this time, Ethan Klein has the upper hand, and Cenk's nephew is incredibly uncomfortable.
Well, okay, but you're watching like Andrew Tate's controversy that finally caught up to him. It's not necessarily this isn't even, I think the most
Hold on,
offensive...
go ahead. What are you saying? It's not what?
This isn't even that bad. Like
How do you know? I just started it.
Because no matter what it is, it's probably is it just a bunch of news reactions?
No, it's a video.
Oh, it's just one singular video?
Yeah, it's one video. I know because I watched it. Look at this idiot.
Huh? Yeah, I mean, it's not high effort.
No. This is like
not
that.
high effort.
I mean, hold on.
No, it's not.
Let me get a taste of this. Why wouldn't they cut that?
Kristen Tate being held in a Romanian jail cell for over 3
Look at him.
months.
He doesn't even know what the fuck he's watching.
I think the main problem here
what a
is
moron, dude.
The main problem here should be that if this is on your main channel, you should definitely edit it more, for sure.
Hold on, Hassan. I really want to see. I want to get a feel for this.
So what's great about this is that they're showing this Twitch streamer not doing any commentary at all whatsoever on the intro of this video. And to be fair, I've seen a lot of garbage from Twitch streamers that's much worse than this, and Cenk's nephew has done and defended much worse than this. Cenk's nephew defended Pokimane for streaming Avatar: The Last Airbender episodes from Nickelodeon, claiming that it's only copyright infringement when somebody reports the copyright infringement, and you should have the right to do so. And I think Cenk's nephew has also watched entire television shows on his stream, just reeling people in with very little commentary. Twitch streamers are often eating on stream, not saying anything, looking at their phone, texting other people while they let other people's content play. And again, I will add, oftentimes they don't attribute the sourcing to this, And considering on this channel, I make an effort, if I'm even inspired by a smaller creator or any creator, to reference them, to link their channel, to highlight them and what they brought to the table for me, it's kind of ridiculous and absurd. And even in response videos that I do, I link my sources to everything under where it says sources in the description under every one of my videos. That's my philosophy behind it. My philosophy is that we're actually not all in competition on YouTube. If I can elevate somebody and somebody can elevate me, then that forward will lead to better growth for all of us and for the message. But of course, Cenk's nephew, the communist, is all about helping himself, his own personal profit, his own personal gain, and never elevating anybody and never highlighting everybody, never giving anybody any shine, which of course comes from his lack of confidence as a person and as someone who owes his career to being the nephew of Cenk Uygur. It is also very attributable to the fact that the communist mindset is inherently selfish, and we're seeing that out on display. But Ethan, give him credit, at least on copyright issues, he's pretty damn good, is somebody who fought for copyright rights in court, has a decision that laid out exactly why he won that case in great detail, what transformative is, which helps all creators going forward, is not having it. This right here is a fundamental difference between a YouTuber, somebody who actually creates or has created, and a Twitcher.
Like, this is like my fan, this is like fan-owned and operated channels that just like straight post VODs, like straight rip VODs, you know what I mean?
Past 6 months, but with the recent developments in their case, it seems like this is just the beginning. Hi, I'm the Internet Anarchist. I create weekly YouTube documentaries.
I mean, this is already theft. He didn't even intro it. He didn't talk about it. He's literally just sitting there quietly for the first 30 seconds. You should sue him. Fuck you, XQC, you thief bitch. I'm not surprised he's stealing people's videos. He steals people's money, too.
Listen, I'm not a fan of Ethan Klein. I think he talks from an unearned position of moral superiority, and I also think he shoots from the hip without thinking about it. But sometimes a broken clock is right. In fact, I hear it's right twice a day, which I don't really think is accurate, because if you have a digital clock that's set to the wrong time and it's progressing throughout the course of the day, it's actually never right ever. But that being said, sometimes Ethan shooting from the hip doesn't realize that he's making an even greater commentary about somebody that he likes while going after someone he dislikes. And to be fair, Ethan's right in this regard.
His attitude gambling on this, by the way, is, look, you're talking to someone who I do not care about IP in the same way that you do. We have differing opinions on it.
You think that you should be able to take people's videos and re-upload them wholesale?
Well, not necessarily. I think
not necessarily.
I think you should still abide by certain standards, but overall, I don't really care. I don't really care if someone rips my IP.
So let's be clear about this. Cenk's nephew's position is ridiculous, absurd, and insane in every possible way. If you think Cenk's nephew doesn't care about you ripping off his image, you ripping off his IP, if you genuinely believe him, make t-shirts of him, put his face on embarrassing slogans, and start selling them, and see how quickly you will get a cease and desist. On top of that, Cenk's nephew just did a stream recently supporting the writer's strike. Remember, he went out and he gave people a bunch of pizzas and all that. And what writers are looking for are streaming royalties in large part. There are other things. I don't really want to get into that. And that is based on the intellectual property that they create. So Cenk's nephew, when he's talking to Adam Conover and they're talking about intellectual property and making sure people are compensated for their work as writers in Hollywood, all of a sudden cares really hard about IP. He's endorsing the writer's strike, even though, by the way, they probably go, and Hollywood tends to go, much, much further in terms of copyright protections than even I would believe in, or most sane, rational people would believe in, because that is within their interests. But was there any pushback from Cenk's nephew against Adam Conover? Was there any of him saying, no, you're going too far? Was there any of him saying, oh, the Screen Actors Guild getting upset about AI-generated actors? That's not something they should be worried about, because that's totally fine. You don't get to own your image rights, your IP, by the way. No. We didn't hear any of that from Cenk's nephew. So this position is totally argued from a position of convenience. When Cenk's nephew is violating the rules for his own personal profit, then it's okay. Then it's no big deal. When Cenk's nephew's complete and utter lack of creativity is out on display for the world to see, nobody even touch it, nobody even talk about about it, nobody even argue about it, because that's totally fine. However, when other people do it, when it's a corporation, then all of a sudden we have some standards. Then all of a sudden we have some limitations. When he could talk about unions, then all of a sudden, you know what? The union right to protect intellectual property is okay. And when you start putting Cenk's nephew's face on inappropriate things, all of a sudden you will find out that he gets quite upset about it. You start making more money than him off of his image and see how fast he gets triggered by that. See how fast he gets upset by that. See how fast Cenk's nephew starts going to war for his intellectual property.
No, but you're talking about IP law, or are you talking about what your preference is?
My personal preferences and what I think, my personal preferences and what I believe and how I believe IP should be run is...
So I hate Ethan for asking this question, because he's saying, are you talking about IP law, which is something that is static, it's something that exists, it could be changed in the future or whatever, but that's not what I'm talking about. And then he's like, your personal preference. And this gives Cenk's nephew leeway to say all these absurd things and then give the caveat, well, I understand you should be within the confines of the law and all of that, which is just not conducive to a good conversation. This is one of the issues I have with people who are unfamiliar with political conversations, political debates, because this is the number one deflection, the number one way people get off of topics that are uncomfortable, the number one way they get out of traps, which is saying, oh, well, my personal position is this, even though nobody gives a damn about how you personally feel in your heart of hearts about the issue. We give a damn about what you think should be the rule for everyone else, what you think should be enforced into law, and how you conduct yourself in the real world.
Is significantly more
how should IPs
hands-off.
be run? How should IPs be run?
I think that there should be a...
Now, right here, after getting the personal preference and all that, we get Ethan actually with a strong follow-up, listening, engaging, and we're going to see that Cenk's nephew is actually dumber than Ethan Klein. It's actually kind of amazing, because Ethan brought Cenk's nephew on because he thinks he's more knowledgeable about these topics, and he thought he was a political expert, and now he's discovering little by little that A, Cenk's nephew is a thief. Not surprising if you know anything about a socialist or communist ideology, and that he's a doofus and he doesn't think through the implications of what he's talking about.
There should be a similar structure to how patents are supposed to exist for all content creation, that after a certain amount of time has passed, for like television productions or for even movies in general, that IP should be completely lifted, and you can make derivative works off of that with ease.
Well, that's like a 50-year scope. That doesn't really
not even a
affect
50-year scope. I think it should be shorter than that.
Okay.
That's number one.
So what Cenk's nephew just stated right there is the current law. You get a protection for a certain period of time, depending on the work, and then it goes into the public domain. Now, this has been extended over and over and over again, largely due to the Disney Corporation lobbying for the Mickey Mouse IP. Ethan throws out a time frame of 50 years, which is actually shorter than a lot of these places have, and Cenk's nephew says it should be even shorter than that. Again, how short should it be?
Number two, I think that as far as like rigorous control over IP, I personally don't have it. I don't believe in it. I don't think it's a good thing.
What do you mean you don't believe in it? I don't understand what that means. You think that people should be able to steal your videos and upload it?
Yeah, which is why I have...
Why? How is that fair to anybody? Do you really believe that?
Again, Ethan hitting Cenk's nephew with the follow-up questions. Ethan actually holding him to account based on the things that he's going to say. On top of that, I will say Cenk's nephew is an expert in weasel words. He weaselly talks around the topic. So right there, he just said, oh, I don't have rigorous control over my IP. What the hell does that mean? What are you even talking about? This is a way to get around when you do make t-shirts of Cenk's nephew, him sending you a cease and desist where he says, oh, well, that's the limit, but I don't think that is what is included in rigorous control. Of course, he maintains some control over his IP. Whether or not he enforces it in all cases is neither here nor there, or as the professionals like to say, is neither nya nor nya. But the thing is, what he does is that he lets you make derivative works as long as that draws more attention to him, because he is a net beneficiary of that. So what he's saying is that he won't enforce the limitations as rigid as a Hollywood executive, because he thinks he benefits more from not enforcing in certain regards, which is very different than a principled stance. It's just what benefits him the most. So when he's stealing your content, when he's playing your entire videos without adding sufficient commentary, then that's totally fine. That's okay. That's something you don't even need to worry about. And I like to compare and contrast what goes on a Cenk's Nephew stream versus something like Sitch and Adam, where they will watch something in its entirety, but it's so broken up within commentary, and it's over the course of 12 to 15 hours. Sometimes they don't even finish. They go off on 4-hour tangents, that it's clearly and obviously something that is transformative in nature. It is not a market substitute for the original work, and you would benefit from watching it in advance first or from watching it after, so it actually ends up helping and promoting that person. And by the way, they don't hide their sourcing from it. But Cenk's Nephew, like all these Twitch streamers seem to do, hashtag not all, I'm sure there's some that don't do it, just play video after video over and over again, and essentially what they're doing is making a version of the fail army with them in the corner making dumb faces and sometimes injecting commentary, and other times they're just eating.
Do you really believe that?
Yeah, well, Ethan, if you literally search Hasanabi, there are 1,000 channels pretty much that literally take everything I do on my stream and re-upload it and make money.
No, I know that you don't care, but you're talking about like the law.
If you look on the internet, there's so many channels that do this. It's just they quite literally do this again. And Ethan, cutting to the heart of the issue by cutting through the nonsense of Cenk's Nephew saying he's so famous, look at how impressive he is.
In a perfect world,
I don't care that much either about what people do with my content.
Yeah,
but
in a perfect world, I think that...
Again, very weaselly by Cenk's Nephew, he's now pivoting to a perfect world, and Ethan is pressing him on this, and we're going to get the dumb answer. I'm assuming it involves some communist jargon, because that's what Cenk's Nephew delivers.
Perfect world, I think that content of this sort would be heavily subsidized by government subsidies in the arts, in the field of art.
You would be subsidized?
Everyone, every type of content creation would be heavily subsidized, so that art would not be created for the sake of
speaking to like a real
monetization.
world right now.
So Cenk's Nephew says, everybody would be paid by the government. It would be subsidized in order to create art, and you wouldn't be able to make profit and all of that because we would be in the utopia, the communist utopia. This kind of childish nonsense reminds me of all those memes that were popular not too long ago, of all these lefty threads talking about how, they're going to create so much art under the socialist utopia, and then the next part of the meme is, no, haha, face the wall. The idea that you're going to pay everybody in order to create art is absurd. It's stupid. It doesn't even happen in these communist societies, these socialist societies. It's just an asinine point. It's garbage. It doesn't add any value to the conversation. And it's just Cenk's Nephew muttering nonsense. And he's like, nobody would do it for profit or anything like that. So after this guy makes a bunch of money selling socialism to idiotic teenagers, he's going to say, in a perfect world, nobody would be able to make money off of what they do, as we're on a very much monetized podcast where we're trying to make money.
Yeah, which is why I'm saying my own idealistic understanding of the world versus what is happening in the real world are two separate issues, or two separate scenarios.
So you believe that IPs, people should just be able to steal your content.
I don't consider it. Well, first of all, I don't even consider it theft, because people do that already, and I have given allowances for people to do that.
No,
However,
I'm not saying people are stealing your content.
Yeah.
I'm talking about IP laws in general.
I think that the protections should only exist for, people like YouTube channels and whatnot, people that are smaller independent operations, and that the restrictions should be heavily limited for larger corporations.
So once you cut through the nonsense, what we find out is that Cenk's Nephew says, smaller independent operations, which even though he's quite successful on Twitch, would cover him. Those have restrictions, those have rules and all of that. But larger corporations, those companies, they don't get anything. So basically, rules for thee, but not for me. If Cenk's Nephew wants to steal a movie and he wants to show other people's content, then it's totally fine. But there's some restrictions for smaller and ill-defined defined term by Cenk's nephew. Operations that are independent, again, ill-defined by Cenk's nephew, because that shouldn't be covered, but whatever.
So how do you decide who's a smaller and who's a larger?
That's actually a really good question. I don't have an answer for that. I've thought about it a lot, but I do not have an answer for it. I don't know.
So Ethan again hits Cenk's nephew with the good follow-up. Solid performance by Ethan Klein, H3H3, on this issue, and Cenk's nephew starts stammering, starts stuttering, and says, well, I thought about this a lot, but I don't have an answer for you. And then he starts comparing it to progressive taxation. I'll play that for you right now.
I think, like, maybe revenue structure-wise, like, after a certain...
So what, you just hit
Yeah, you just hit
a
like
money
a certain
number, and then
revenue
you have
cap,
no more
and then
protection?
it limits down.
What if
like,
you-
like a
that's not- what
progressive
if-
taxation structure
Uh-huh.
where it, like, basically limits the amount that you can maintain your own intellectual property patents.
And Cenk's nephew basically says that as you become more successful with intellectual property, much like a progressive tax, you then lose your intellectual property rights, which I find absolutely hilarious. First of all, we're just ignoring any equal protection under the law at this point, which makes sense because, again, Cenk's nephew says that he's a socialist, he's a communist, so he doesn't believe in rule of law, he doesn't believe in sensible policies, he doesn't believe in sensible economic policies, he's essentially an economic flat earther, but also, it's just funny to hear him say this, to hear him spell this out, because he can always weaselly move the cutoff far away from where he actually is. He can always deflect off into another point as he becomes more and more successful. But also, it quite literally is the meme of punishing success. You know how they say, oh, we're not into that, it's just if you make more, we want you to contribute more. He's quite literally outlining a scenario where you lose your rights because of your success. And if you start failing, you may get those rights back. But as you start becoming more and more successful, you continuously lose those protections.
What if that's how you make a living? So they take your IP away, and then all of a sudden your business goes bankrupt because everyone can steal your content.
What do you mean? Why would your business go bankrupt?
Your business, potentially, you're making money by creating proprietary or unique content.
Okay.
So once you were like, hey, my business is doing great, I'm making $10 million a year, and then you lose your IP. How does that make sense?
Because it's still unique content creation, which
Well,
means
people
that
just start re-uploading it, and then your bottom line is going to get crushed.
yeah, you'll certainly, well, on your old library content, you would still have like some.
You see that this is so much more complicated
Yeah,
than it is.
100%. Yeah, I do.
Why make things more complicated? I don't understand that.
Well,
So Ethan asked Cenk's nephew a follow-up question. It's a pretty basic question for somebody who's in the political space, who's supposedly thought about this a lot, and Cenk's nephew doesn't really have an answer. And like he's his father, like he's lecturing him, like big old Cenk used to, he says, do you see how what you're proposing is far more complicated than it needs to be, and we should probably have simple rules? I think Ethan Klein, from talking to Cenk's nephew right here, might have just realized that he's actually a capitalist, that he actually wants rule of law economically, simple rules that a business can follow, and Cenk's nephew is being schooled, humiliated, humbled by somebody who is considered to be one of the internet's greatest buffoons.
I mean, I think this is still, the way that it currently exists is still pretty complicated.
It's not that complicated. It's like, I mean, the only
It
complication
definitely is complicated. People abuse DMCA. You know this already. Like people, there are like
that's not complicated.
even in the way that I have simplified my structure, where I'm like, do whatever you want, make money if you want off of the content. Even then, there are bad actors. For example, there is a network of like botted channels from Vietnam that until like, I don't know, 3 months ago were like uploading videos about fishing that then turn around and start uploading videos of my streams.
That's just okay. But that's not my point.
But then
is
they
that
DMCA other fan channels or even my channel sometimes. They try to DMCA me with my content, and they're abusing the DMCA structure.
It's not complicated. It's just that you just need to sue someone to find actual resolve.
So it's very interesting because Ethan went through this whole experience with DMCA claim abuse, how Cenk's nephew just does not understand this, and he hand waves and says, oh, you get it, to a little bit about how this is abused, but what he doesn't understand is that this is actually abused in terms of YouTube's DMCA claim system. That is not something by law. It requires these companies to provide a mechanism for copyright claim, and that's the whole point of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. but the claim itself is not a legal notice up until the point where you get a legal notice. Cenk's nephew knows surprisingly little about this, and I do find it funny that these people are uploading his stuff and then claiming him, and it's starting to piss him off. It just amuses me, and they're claiming all these fan channels because Cenk's nephew doesn't manage his IP, doesn't make his rules clear, which shows you he shouldn't be in charge of anything. I love this exchange in every possible way. I love how sensitive Cenk's nephew ended up getting when Ethan was calling him out without even realizing it, and I find the whole prospect of him getting destroyed by Ethan Klein, of all people, quite amusing. But hey, those are just my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me getting into Cenk's nephew being destroyed, humiliated by Ethan Klein. Till next time.